What's going on, guys? It is Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you the follow-up video to the Dynasty Startup article video that we did on Marky's real first article that he wrote on the Fantasy Stock Exchange Draft Guide. We're going to go into the rookie draft this time. And while we got the Dynasty Startup and all the gloss and glamour of taking near Patrick Mahomes's, Dalvin Cook's, Julio Jones's of the world, now we're going to be talking into the bread and butter and why Dynasty is so different from redraft, and that is the yearly rookie draft. Take it away, Mikey. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm great, and I love talking about rookies, and I love talking about the rookie draft more specifically. It's one of those things where if you're coming in as a first-year Dynasty player, you're used to having your redraft draft. It's so weird to say. You have your redraft draft every single year, and you're taking the same guys year in and year out, whether it's round 1, 2, 3, or 4. Your rookies change every single year. You got a whole new set of names to choose from. You got a whole different way to value them. You get to have the anticipation of seeing where they're going to land in real life. It's very exciting. And if you're someone who has a lot of rookie picks year in and year out, or if you're just entering in your very first year and you have your stereotypical 4 to 5 rookie picks, there's a lot of research that comes with it. But man, it's fun. It's fun stuff.
Oh yeah, this is my real favorite part. Again, obviously, Dynasty startups are always a joy to get into, but once that initial season is done, it's all about them rookies. It's all about them young guys coming through the NFL draft and really being acclimated to these guys. So you guys are really owning the draft guide, as actually real quick, you guys can see at the bottom of the screen running across. We broke down a lot of these guys you're going to be seeing in said rookie draft. So that being said, let's take it away. But before we do that, going to hit the intro on y'all. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start off with the overall summary of raising rookies, how we can be successful in our rookie drafts. Mikey, let's start us off. Where do we really start off with in preparing for said rookie drafts, in your opinion?
So the first thing that you have to start off with is the research. And conducting rookie research can be very difficult, especially if you've never done it before, or maybe you're not a big college football fan like myself. I'm not actually too into college football, but I love researching rookies. And there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can go about researching. It's all about finding what works best for you, or combining what works best for you, I guess you should say. So I kind of wanted, before we jumped into the strategies, I kind of wanted to go over different research strategies, because with that being said, you have to understand the rookies before you can kind of figure out what you want to do with them. And the best way to do that is by doing as much research as possible, so that we have like 4 or 5 different ways that you could potentially research your rookies. And I'll start with the first one, which is going to be the obvious one, and that's film analysis. So obviously, year to year in your redraft leagues, you watch the NFL every Sunday. You see what Pat Mahomes does every Sunday at 1 o'clock, or you see what Julio Jones is doing at 4 o'clock, or what have you. But let's say you don't watch college football. You're not used to watching these guys play each time. So what do? How do you do this? You go online, you go to your YouTubes, you Google search, you do whatever you can, and you find film on these guys. Now, one of the things that you have to be careful of is you don't want to exclusively watch highlight videos.
Exactly. I was hoping you brought that up. A lot of these people will just say, oh, Tylan Wallace best plays, and then they'll watch this highlight film, and they'll be like, okay, you know what? Look, this guy's like the next Julio Jones.
Everyone is the rookie 101 if you're watching highlights.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, just being able to understand that highlights do not tell the full story on a player. If you're going to go with the film analysis strategy and you're not just fully banking on the numbers, you got to put the effort in. You got to go on YouTube or go on any platform. I know Dynasty Nerds has a film room as well you can access if you go through the subscription or whatever you do choose. you watch these guys and you watch the full games and every single play that they play in those games, because that gives you the full story of how to understand. Now, you're lucky we did a lot of that on our own for you guys in this draft guide that hopefully you guys are really watching this video on. But if you, for whatever reason, or not for whatever reason, if you also want to get more knowledge and more personal feel to these guys, because let's be honest, film is subjective. Everybody's going to get stuff wrong, but being able to identify and form your own real informed and knowledgeable opinion on these guys is how you get that competitive edge. So you could take what we tell you and you could also apply it when you're watching your film on your own. But make sure, again, when you're watching that film, you're not searching up highlight films, because that just gives you absolutely nothing.
For sure. And if this is your first time doing film breakdowns and film analysis, I promise you, it's a lot harder than you think it is. There's a reason why you're buying the draft guide out here, and that's because
100%.
You need people that you can trust. You need people that you know, that people know what to look out for when they're watching film. You know, sure, you can watch the highlight tapes, and like you said, you can watch Tylan Wallace dust a guy for 60 yards and look phenomenal while doing it. But you got to watch the actual game footage, because you watch game footage, you can see how they line up. You can see how a wide receiver moves off the line. You can see if a running back is able to block for the quarterback successfully. You can see how a quarterback reacts to the blitz, how a quarterback extends a play or what have you. These are things that statistics can't necessarily tell you. Also, by watching film, you know, for example, Dyami Brown. He's a rookie receiver that I'm much higher on the consensus because I really like his film breakdown. But if you're looking at his stats, he's had over 1,000 yards the last 2 years. If I tell you, oh yeah, this incoming rookie had 1,000 yards back-to-back years and combined for like 20 touchdowns or whatever it was, you're probably going to be pretty excited about him. But you'd probably be less excited about him when I said, yeah, you could probably get him like your third round of your rookie draft or something like that. Like this is stuff that film tells you. And for that reason, in my opinion, if you are exceptional at reading film, it is probably the best way to do it. It's going to give you the most in-depth answer. But as I mentioned before, it is the hardest thing to do, and it is going to take a lot of practice. So as a first-time Dynasty player, if you're not someone that watches college or isn't too familiar with it, doesn't know a lot of the technical terms of football, you're more of just a fantasy fan, I would give it a try. But I would definitely also listen to the experts.
And for sure. And we are extensive fantasy football people over here contributing to that draft guide. And we still have things that we really want to improve on as well. But for the overall basis that we provide right now in terms of those prospects, in terms of the breakdowns, again, we're going to have series on this actual guide where Tyler breaks down what to look for in film. Corey really mentions what metrics he values when looking at the film. And as always, on the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel, you would have already seen multiple installments of our prospect battles breakdown, where we throw in those film clips. We explain what we see on film. We combine it with the numbers. We really try to give you over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange that all-inclusive look at these upcoming young talents. So fully, if you know how to watch film and you know what to look for and you know really how to analyze the key things you see, this is by far the best way, in my opinion, because it gives you full context as to why this guy produced the numbers, why he didn't produce those numbers. Maybe he got hurt. Maybe he didn't play fully 100% in the national championship. I'm going to mention that with Jaylen Waddle because I just feel like doing that. There's so many different things that you see and notice on film that the true numbers, the true advanced metrics really don't give you. Now, I'm not going to be that guy that says, oh, it's fully on film. You got to watch only film, because I think you're going to take it away with this next point. You got to balance your overall plan. You got to incorporate those numbers, incorporate those metrics, and really be able to say, okay, well, you know what? Why is this guy good? How good was he early on, and how sustained was his success? Take it away, though. Aside from film, what's another way you can really analyze the incoming rookie field?
Absolutely. The next one's going to be stat crunching. And this is pretty self-explanatory. You know, you look at the guy's stats over the last handful of years. When you're looking at stats, you definitely want to have at least a loose idea of how college division works. Like obviously the SEC, it's a pretty stacked division, you know, pretty stacked conference. Like you want to know who's having these big numbers against these big competitions. And stat crunching will always have a special place in my heart because when I first started playing Dynasty, I refused to watch film. I would watch highlight videos to get excited about the guys. No. I wouldn't use the highlights in my drafts, but if I really like the guy's stats, I would go and watch his highlight videos and be like, okay, yep, see, I knew I liked this guy. I knew I did. But the thing with stat crunching is that it is definitely flawed if this is the only tactic that you use. So I think it's going to work really well for the top 15 to 18 rookie picks. Okay, you see these receivers, they went off for 16 or 1700 yards this year. Oh, this running back had 22 rushing touchdowns and did this and did that. Yeah, you can gauge your top maybe first 2 rounds purely off of stats if you really wanted to. Wouldn't recommend it, but you probably could get away with it. But the issue is you're not going to find those depth guys, or you're going to end up reaching on guys that you shouldn't, or you're going to completely miss on guys that you should. For example, Terrace Marshall has not had 1,000 yards in a single season. I'm pretty sure over the last 2 seasons he's combined for less than 1,500. Now he does have over 20 touchdowns. I think it's 23 if I'm remembering off the top of my head. But those yards, that yardage total is nothing to write home about. But Terrace Marshall is potentially a day 1 draft pick, if not an early day 2 pick, and is likely going to go in the first round of most people's dynasty rookie drafts in non-superflex leagues. And this is where you can completely miss on players if you're sticking purely to stats. On the other hand, like I mentioned, Dyami Brown, back-to-back seasons of 1,000+ yards, looks really good, good vertical threat, decent enough route running, everything like that. But if you're going purely off of stats, you're going to end up taking him at like 112 or something like that. And you're going to be like, oh, shit, I could have had him in the mid-3rd round. What am I doing?
100%. And that's why, again, we can combine both stats with also people that only value the analytics. It drives me crazy when people are like, oh, Seth Williams is wide receiver 6 because he did this at 19 years old. He broke it at 19. I understand that it's impressive that he did that in the SEC, but when you watch the film, you can see the context as to why these things were the case. Now, when you're the number 1 weapon on an Auburn offense that really lacks anything else aside from Tank Bigsby they got this year, but really nothing to write home about. I mean, you got Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz. Like, okay, cool. Whereas people who look at Jalen Waddle, they'll say, oh, well, he never really produced. Well, you're not giving him the benefit of context because Alabama these past 3 years has had the best college wide receiver room I have ever seen. Four first-round receivers in the last 2 years. Mechie's got a chance to be a top 50 pick next year as well. You have Calvin Ridley before that. Like this wide receiver room was so uber talented. So on face value, you're going to see, oh, Jalen Waddle had 600 receiving yards. When in reality here, this is the first season that he had to really break out. And he was averaging 120 yards per game when he was healthy and a touchdown per game. So being able to identify both the context of situations and balancing out with the analytics, with the stats, is how you really get the full overall breakdown of what a player brings to the table. So I fully agree. If you're solely looking at the stats, you're solely looking at the analytics, like people are talking about like breakout age and freaking BMI as like determining. Like, I don't care if this guy's 205 or fucking 185 pounds. If he can ball the hell out, he can ball the hell out. So, I mean, trying to sort players based off like little intricacies like that just kind of makes me freaking dizzy at times trying to understand like the rationale.
Yeah, it kind of grinds my gears too.
Yeah,
I always get a kick out of it. You go on Twitter, on fantasy football Twitter, and you'll have a film guy arguing with an analytics guy.
Yeah, all the time.
While people like me and you are sitting on the sidelines like, I mean, why don't you combine both and tell the full story?
yeah, it's hilarious because every time I see those arguments, there's that GIF. It's like that little girl. She's like, "Why not both?" And it's like that's the truth. That is the truth. Why not both? You can watch the film, see the context of the situation, see why they produced or didn't produce, and you can also combine it with the numbers. Say, oh, you know what? This guy was in a good spot while he looked pretty good on film. He still ultimately didn't produce as well as this guy, meaning that although they both look good on film, this guy outproduced him, so I should rank this guy ahead of him. So understanding all of that is really how you get the true edge in your rookie drafts and ultimately being able to provide the correct order, the correct ranking. Because if you were only looking at stats, you probably missed out on guys like Terry McLaurin. You probably missed out on even a guy like DK Metcalf, who, quite frankly, in his most productive year ended up getting hurt. I think he finished with about 800 yards. Like, you missed out on those type of guys because you didn't look into the context as to what their film told you.
Yep.
So 100%, I fully agree that they both have their flaws. I do prefer film over strictly stats because
I do too. Yeah,
it gives you the view of the player, but balance it out. Like, what do you have to lose from really incorporating both factors into your ultimate strategy?
for sure. And then the third thing that I would say is a good strategy. Now, if you're only using this strategy, it is a working strategy, but it's a lazy strategy. And you're kind of just going with the flow here. And that's just the simple look at the consensus rankings. You know, every year, you know, Fantasy Pros is the big one. They take all the experts in the industry, they put all the rankings in one place, and you can kind of see where the consensus lies. You know, like if there's a receiver that on 90% of people's rankings, he's somewhere between wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 7, chances are he's probably going to be a pretty decent receiver in the NFL. But if you do this, you are going to miss out on the sleepers in your rookie draft. And arguably that's where the really fun part of Dynasty lies. I mean, back in 2019, Terry McLaurin went, believe it or not, in like the third round of rookie drafts. And that's not even in super flex leagues. Like Terry McLaurin literally just had an ADP of like the early to mid third round. And now we're looking at it now. And you could argue that he was a top 3 wide receiver in that entire class. He's
Easily
phenomenal. And that's one of the things that you are going to majorly lose out if you're only looking at consensus rankings. And if you're only looking at the consensus rankings, not only you're missing out on your sleepers, but chances are half of your league is probably doing the same thing. You know, if you want to get ahead of your league, you need to put the work in. If everyone's looking at the consensus rankings, guess what? You could probably predict who you're going to get ahead of time because like it's
just going to follow the status quo.
Okay, I have pick 7. I'll probably get the guy who's number 7 on the consensus rankings. I'm cool with that, I guess. You know, like,
and you hit the nail on the coffin here. Like, yes, I would say this strategy is pretty safe for people that are younger to Dynasty. I mean, less experienced in Dynasty. They just look at, say, our rankings over on the Draft Guide. They look at Fantasy Pros rankings. They look at the Scores rankings. They look at any type of these rankings. However, while we enjoy, and I will absolutely be happy with you guys taking our rankings at full value, we don't necessarily want you to just take our rankings and just use it based on that. We want you to look at our rankings, understand the process behind why we do it in the order we do, and make your own informed opinion. Because that's my number one thing with attacking really any draft, specifically the rookie draft absolutely applies here. If you like a player that we have low and you have your reasoning and you have your process for it,
get your guy.
Who the fuck are we to tell you that, oh, you shouldn't take him at 15 because we have him at 24? No, if you think he's going to return 15th best or higher value, take him. Like, take him. Stick with your guy. Like, there are guys that I am going to be higher on than the consensus throughout the cycle, and they're my guys. And guess what? If they hit, I'm not shutting up about it. I'm not shutting up about it. So overall, like, while it's pretty safe sticking with the consensus rankings here, you completely negate the competitive edge you can get on the rest of your league by just sticking with the status quo. So I fully agree with you here. While it's viable to get you pretty safely started off, you're not going to finish last. You're probably not going to finish first because you're not taking those chances. There's multiple ways where I think this strategy can be improved, and it can be improved to the next one. And that's going to be the all of the above, where you're taking factors of each of these strategies. You're taking film, you're taking analytics, and you're kind of seeing what these more expert, more experienced players are saying, and you're mixing it up. You're concocting it in a lab. You're saying, oh yeah, bueno, this is the top combination of these teams. Or these strategies, not teams. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the overall all of the above strategy?
Yeah, all of the above is how you have to go about it. And I use that in my personal process. And I actually have a specific order that I like to do everything in. I mean, obviously, you find out a guy a little bit later on, your order gets a little messed up. It's whatever. You see things on Twitter that you didn't know about before. But my process in the offseason is I'll always start off with the film on a certain player. So I'll watch the film on him, and I found that this is the absolute best way to shed bias right from the start. You know, you're not looking at highlights, you're not looking at stats, you're not reading about things that this guy did in college on Twitter. Like, obviously you can't avoid some of that stuff, but you go in, you watch the film, you make your own opinion You start to make your assessments. You think of, okay, if they're a wide receiver, you're looking at, well, what's their route tree looking like? What's the release off the line?
Can they beat
good
press?
What's that?
Can they beat press?
Exactly. And there's so many different factors to take into consideration. So the first thing, and I kind of listed these in the order that I do personally go over them. So I'll look at film, I'll make my assessments. From there, that's when I start reading into the stats. You know, I take what I learned from the tape and I apply it to their stats. From there, I'll usually have like, okay, that makes sense kind of moment, or I'll find something wrong. You know, maybe I just gave this guy a terrible grade, but I check his stats and he had like 1,400 yards or something like that. Or on the other hand, I gave this guy a phenomenal grade, but he only had 400 total yards on the year. And I'm just like, what the hell was I seeing? You know?
Or even like exactly like you're mentioning like the overall output of yardage, but you can even look at factors like, oh, on film, he didn't make, or like when I watched this film, I watched these 3 games and he didn't make people miss. And then you end up looking into PFF Premium College and you see, oh yeah, this guy was actually top 3 in the class at breaking tackles. Your evaluation might be a little off because again, film is so subjective to the point that you're going to miss some areas. Maybe you see first tackle he doesn't miss. You just have it in your head, oh, he doesn't break tackles. And then the next 3 games that you didn't watch, he's breaking 10 a game. So like being able to understand that we are all human. We are all going to miss things on film. While film is going to give us the overall basis of what we view a player to be, looking into those stats to really back up our claims is how we can really definitively say, oh, you know what? This guy has great numbers in making people miss. And from the film I watched, also made people miss. So balancing those two out, coming to the collective reasoning, or frankly, eliminating bias is why I love really stat checking, fact checking, analytic checking, the things that I've seen on film as well. So I fully agree. These are the first 2 in order you have to do. You got to get the overall context and real personal touch to the player. And then you got to back up those facts with actual quantifiable skills that the stats are going to be able to tell you, the metrics are going to be able to tell you. So I fully agree. These are the first 2 in order. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the third would be the consensus. I agree too. Like obviously, again, you don't just want to follow consensus, but if I have a guy at RB12 or actually you have here, I have a guy at RB8 and he's like the consensus RB3. That's something I kind of want to look into. I'm like, oh, what did I miss anything on him? Like when I saw this guy, I didn't really see this. And while the consensus may not end up switching your opinion or swaying your opinion on him, it's always nice to really have the benefit of the doubt and being able to give a player, because you could have missed something on film or you could have missed something in the analytics department that makes you think, oh, you know what? Like I misjudged this guy. Maybe I got to rewatch him. Maybe I got to go through the film a second or third time through just to fully make sure that I saw what I saw on the initial viewing.
Yeah. And obviously you always want to stick to your gut, but it's not healthy to only, you know, these are my rankings. This is all I'm going to listen to, because as you were mentioned, you could be a supreme god at searching up film and analyzing it and breaking it down yourself. But like you said, we're all only human. You know, I see game A and you see game B, and we see 2 completely different things. And then maybe we both watched game C on top of it, but we still have seen 2 completely different spins of it. You know, it all depends on how much content you take in. I always check my own rankings. I check my own analysis. I check everything with some of the experts in the industry that I really trust, because I want to see how mine stacks up to theirs. You know, it's always good to compare your notes with someone else, especially if you're just getting into Dynasty and you're just getting into learning how to, you know, analyze film or read the right statistics or whatever. If you're just learning Dynasty, check your work. You know, that's the only way that you're going to get any better, because maybe you think you're doing a great job and you know, you're just going balls to the wall with it, taking off running. But then you check the consensus and you're like, oh shit, I'm like the complete opposite of all of these guys. Then you know, kind of want to go and check over your work again. So especially coming in as a new Dynasty player, I can't stress it enough. It's so good. Practice makes perfect, but you have to check your work.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just like your essay. You're writing an essay for school. You're like, oh yeah, no, this essay is gangbusters. This is an A, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? You proofread every single bit of your work when you're in school. Why don't you do it with other aspects of your life? If you think, okay, this is a good initial product, I feel like the conclusion that I came to was perfect, the processes were perfect, yada, yada, yada. I think this is a great amount of work. It never hurts to read it through. Maybe you miss something. Maybe you misidentify something. Maybe there's just certain points that don't flow nicely in how you explain your process. Because let's be honest here, your process is what ends up giving you the results, not just, oh, I ranked, I don't know, Christian McCaffrey RB1 this year. That means that every single year I'm going to get my rankings right. Or going into the rookie draft, say last year, oh, I got that Jonathan Taylor would be the best rookie running back. So this year, whatever I say goes. Like if I say that Najee Harris is going to be the best running back, he's 100% going to be the best. No. You cannot just sit tight while other people around you are trying to improve, trying to learn, trying to really get better at their process. Don't just rest on your laurels because you got one decision, right? Always strive for improvement. As we've kind of mentioned, balancing out these three aspects, it's going to be the true integral part of improving your overall process. So I fully agree here. This is the order I would go with. And yeah, aside from that, what are your real strategies or real things that you see in terms of how the rookie draft is conducted from multiple viewpoints, or the overall different strategies you can attack it with?
Sure. So if you remember in the last video, with the Dynasty Startup, we went over, the all-out blitz, the rookie fever, the every year contender. And you're going to see a similar trend in this one, because you can kind of adapt the strategies in unique ways to a rookie draft. Now, obviously, rookie drafts are supremely different than a Dynasty Startup. But overall, you think of your strategy and you want to ultimately stick to your strategy. And the first one I'm going to go over, I call it the win now strategy. And what that means is you're going after your top rookies. Maybe you have pick 107 or 108, but you want to get up to 101 or 102. Let's say you are a firm believer that Najee Harris is going to be this elite world-breaking running back, or you're buying the hype and Jamar Chase coming in. He outproduced Justin Jefferson in college, and Jamar Chase is going to be this revolutionary wide receiver, and you just have to have him on your team. This is the win now strategy. You are doing whatever it is that you can. You are trading up. You are getting your guys. You are literally just doing whatever you can to win now. If you went with the all-out blitz strategy in your Dynasty Startup, chances are you probably already traded away your first round rookie. But if you didn't go that strategy, maybe you went with the every year contender, or maybe this isn't your first rookie draft. Maybe your league is in year 3 or year 4 and you have that middle to late first round pick. You do what you have to do to get that final piece on your team. Maybe you're one running back away from being a top 3 team in your league. Maybe you're one wide receiver away from being a top 3 team in your league, or super flex. You just need one more quarterback. You trade up, you get, even if you can't get 101, because
Zach Wilson.
Exactly. There are so many different possibilities, but the win now is always going to stress on screw my later picks. Let's get the early picks. I don't care. I'm getting my guys. Some of the pros and cons with this is pros. You're going to get a stud. Almost guaranteed you're going to get a stud. Very rarely do you completely whiff on a top 4, top 5 rookie pick. I mean, with the exception of N'Keal Harry a couple of years ago, a handful of years before that, Corey Davis was actually the 101, believe it or not, in a lot of drafts out there. So
Mike Williams that year too.
Possible. What's that?
Mike Williams that year too. Like if you had a early rookie pick that year, like you ended up with Corey Davis or Mike Williams, like that's not really affecting you now.
So, but while we're talking about that, the higher up you pick, the less chances of it going to be a bust. Like if this guy, if you're picking this guy at number 3 or number 4 overall, you're picking him at number 3 or 4 overall for a reason. You traded up that high because you didn't think you'd be able to get him at 107 or 108, because the consensus is so high on him, because everyone wants a piece of this guy on their roster. So definitely the biggest pro is that you're likely going to get a stud, and you're going to have him for a long time, because obviously you're drafting him as a rookie. And chances are, if you're grabbing a top 3, top 4 guy, you can plug him into your lineup immediately. Jamar Chase, I guarantee, is going to be a day 1 starter, arguably.
Devonta Smith as well. Like there's ample top talent in this draft. You're talking about 1 QB. You got those 2, 3 running backs and you got a few receivers at the top there, if you have the 108, 109, you think, okay, realistically here, like there's a kind of a tier drop off between those top 5 picks versus the pick I have. You can make that move up and you can understand, okay, you know what? Like I did pay a decent amount, but the caliber of player I'm getting here is tremendous. I'm going to briefly mention the idea of drafting in tiers after we go through both strategies here. But it's a huge factor in the ultimate decision you make towards every single rookie draft, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the only cons that I can really think of this one is, I mean, obviously you're giving up your depth picks. So you're not, I mentioned Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round earlier. You're not going to have your 3rd round pick to grab your Terry McLaurin. Or, you know, in my own league back in 2019, I was actually just looking at this today. Gabriel Davis, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He was our Mr. Irrelevant pick, literally went very last in the entire draft at pick 512. And now Gabriel Davis is potentially going to see a wide receiver 2 featured role in that offense as soon as next year. You know, there's the depth picks are awesome. And going about this strategy, you are going to miss your depth picks and it is going to suck. It's also not guaranteed to get you a stud, as we mentioned before, and you're going to mortgage your future. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to mortgage your future, because let's say last year, right? Some people had Jonathan Taylor as their number 1 overall, and some people had Clyde Edwards-Helaire as their number 1 overall. But those were typically the top 2 consensuses, right? Let's say last year you traded away pick 106 and your 1st round this year and maybe a future 2nd round pick so that you can get 101 and you got Jonathan Taylor. You're already ahead on the deal by having Jonathan Taylor. I mean, granted, like I mentioned before, you're not going to hit on every stud, but it's going to take more than the 106 and a late 1st rounder in the future to get Jonathan Taylor these days. So if you think you're about to get a sure thing, you do what you got to do to get up there. So, I mean, mortgaging your future, yes, it's technically a con right now, but if it pans out, you're probably going to get a pretty good return on investment there.
100%. I mean, you're talking about Jonathan Taylor at the, let's just say the 102, 103 last year in the super flex, 101, 102, and a non-super flex. Yes, you probably gave up the 106, a future 1st, and maybe a current 2nd. But at the same time, you're looking at that now. You're looking at Jonathan Taylor versus, let's say, Jerry Jeudy, a 1st and a 2nd. Like, which side are you going to take? Let's be quite honest here. It's going to be still Jonathan Taylor, especially in a non-super flex. So I fully agree. Understanding when to capitalize on that break in tier is going to be how you accumulate the most value. Like if you thought, oh, Jonathan Taylor is going to be the next franchise running back and you traded up for him last year, guess what? He's probably about a top 6 overall pick in 1 quarterback dynasty startups right now. In Superflex, he's probably a late 1st, early 2nd type, which you absolutely smash the return on investment for what you actually put into him if you were to have traded up for him in the rookie draft last year. So on the flip side, though, let's just say hypothetically you're at the beginning of a tier. Like there's a tier break before your pick. You're at the beginning of the tier and you're like, oh, you know what? These next 6 or so players are kind of similar to me. I don't really care which one I get. Then you could look at the trade down specialist strategy. Take it away, Mikey. How does the trade down specialist operate?
Absolutely. So if you consider yourself to be a trade down specialist, it's exactly that. You are good at trading down and you're good at recognizing your later picks. One of the examples that I used in the article is that, let's say it's 2019 or 2020 again, and you have pick 104 and someone is fighting tooth and nail to trade up to pick 104. Top 4 first round picks are typically highly coveted, and you could get 2 late first round picks for that one pick. For example, somebody wanted CeeDee Lamb so supremely badly in this situation, and they gave you pick 107 and 109. Now, obviously, everyone was super high on CeeDee Lamb. He was most people's wide receiver 1, if not their wide receiver 2 last year. He was getting a absolute shit ton of hype. But you say, you know what? 107, 109, there's a couple of guys that I like there. You know what? Fine, we'll trade down. Let's say you turn those picks into Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins. You know, that's phenomenal. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love CeeDee Lamb. I'm a big CeeDee Lamb guy. But
you get 2 top 20 receivers. You get 2 top 20 receivers out of that.
I would much rather have Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins over CeeDee Lamb any day.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably, I'd rather have Justin Jefferson over CeeDee Lamb anyway at this point. But it's one of those things where there's so much potential in it. But with every bit of potential, there's also downside. You know, similar rankings. Henry Ruggs and Jalen Reagor were floating right around that area last year too. You could have picked them instead of CeeDee Lamb. So, you know, it's one of those things. Hindsight's 2020. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You gotta weigh your risk reward. But if you've done your research, if you're confident in your rankings and you're confident in what you're about to do and what you're going to draft, trading down is always a viable strategy, because the more picks you have, the higher chance you have of landing that stud. You know, I mentioned in the last strategy, the higher you pick, the less likely you are to miss. Well, the more picks you have, the more likely you are to actually land. So it's one of those things where, depending on how you look at it, you know, I personally love this strategy because I have a lot of faith in my own personal rankings. Admittedly, last year, if I did this, I wouldn't have traded down because I was obsessed with CeeDee Lamb. But nonetheless, I mean, this is definitely an interesting way to spin your dynasty rookie draft.
100%. And this is kind of comes into play. I kind of briefly mentioned I'm going to get into this. Tier-based rookie drafting. You have your tiers. You say, okay, you know what? I value these guys in a certain aspect. I think they're going to be able to be this productive in the future. And then say that's a tier 6. Then you have your 7 through 12. Then you have your 13 through 18. Understanding what kind of players are grouped together. And quite frankly, you want to be at the bottom of the tier. You don't want to be at the top of the tier, because all that tells me is, oh, I'm at the top of the tier. There's so much more value I can accumulate in navigating this tier. So say, for instance, you think the 108 to 112 is basically just the same player. Guess what? You could turn that 108 into the 112 and the 204. And you could say, oh, you know what? Like, I had 112 similar to 108 anyways, and I just got this free 204 that I can take another dart throw with. So being able to really understand and balance your ranges. I sound like I'm a poker player right now because I do play poker, but being able to balance your ranges of outcomes and value is how you can get the optimal return on value for those rookie picks. So I fully agree, whether that's trading up because you think this player or these two players are head and shoulders above the rest of the class, or trading down. You say, oh, you know what? Like, this pick is going to be similar to the guy I can take 6 away from now. I fully agree. Heck, this could happen. You could do both in the same draft, depending on how the values really are realistically. If you are that guy who really just accumulated all the rookie fever from first year, you have a bunch of rookie picks second year, you can navigate the board as well as possible. Say you have the 104 and the 107, you move up to the 101. Then you could turn your 109 and turn it into the 201 and 202. You can have so much flexibility in your draft if you have the capital to be able to navigate with. So I fully agree. I love really both of these strategies equally. Probably I do enjoy trading down a little more because I can take another dart throw and I trust myself in being able to rank appropriately. But if there's that stud like a Jonathan Taylor or a Saquon Barkley type prospect that you cannot live without, go ahead, get your guy.
For sure. And no matter what strategy you go with, I highly recommend, even if it's your first rookie draft, you're going to mess up. You might as well have fun while you're doing it. Make moves. Seriously, the coolest thing about Dynasty is you have this trading aspect during your draft. And nobody has more fever to trade than Dynasty owners on rookie draft day. No one. Like, it is a frenzy, you know. This year, even in one quarterback leagues, let's say Trevor Lawrence is sitting there at 108 or 109, which I don't know how reasonable that is because he is going to go higher than he should in one quarterback leagues. But let's say that you have 107. Someone really needs Trevor Lawrence. You don't need Trevor Lawrence. This guy wants Trevor Lawrence so bad, he gives you 110 and 205 or something like that for you to trade back 3 picks. And you already knew you weren't going to take Trevor Lawrence, so you're really only trading back 2 picks. Like, it's just... It's so much fun. It's so much fun to trade back. It's so much fun to keep your options open. There are endless possibilities on rookie draft day. Whatever you're going to do, you might get it wrong, you might get it right, but that's fantasy for you.
100%. So you got the 2 strategies of really optimizing value. You can either trade up because you believe a guy's head and shoulders, or you trade down because, let's be honest, every Joe Schmo is basically the same in terms of production. There's a middle ground though. What is your middle ground strategy in attacking a rookie draft where you're comfortable, you're not overly excited, but you're fine with the value at the current pick that you're at? Take it away with the best available.
Yeah, so the best available is going to be my middle ground. Now, maybe you're not an active trader. Maybe there's nothing that's particularly interesting in a trade. whatever. The best available is exactly what it sounds like. You're just going out there, and when it's your turn to pick, you take the best guy available. So obviously you have your rankings sorted out by positions. You know, you have your top quarterbacks, your top running backs, your receivers, your tight ends, but you should also figure out a big board for yourself. And that kind of ties into your whole tiered rankings way of drafting, is that you want to figure out, okay, this guy's my RB3, but there's 5 receivers that I want over him, or vice versa. You know, you figure out your tiers. Let's say you just won your league. So you have pick 112, and you really don't need particularly anything. When pick 112 comes around, maybe you have your eyes set on someone, but your 6th overall player on your entire board is sitting there at 112. It's a position that you don't necessarily need, but there's a lot of talent. Dude just fell 6 or 7 spots to you. You take him and you don't think twice. It's literally just you take the best guy possibly available. You let your league mates worry about addressing their needs in rookie drafts, because I got news for you. You don't use the rookie draft to address your needs. And if you have one and you need a running back, okay, congratulations. You just use the rookie draft to address your needs. But 90% of the time, you are not drafting rookies to address your needs, because most rookies will take 1 to 3 seasons to actually start producing in the NFL. If you draft based on your needs, you will always be behind in your league. And that's why you draft best available, because worst case scenario, you don't need that position. Guess what? That's trade value right there. You know, it's a no-brainer for me.
100%. Let's just say, again, hypothetically, you're at that 111, 112, and the top 3 running backs being Etienne, Harris, and Williams are gone. Top 4 quarterbacks are gone. Kyle Pitts is gone, and the other 3 receivers are gone. But you really need a running back, and you're looking at making a decision between Michael Carter, who I like, versus Rashad Bateman, who should be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft, should be a wide receiver 1 or 2 from the get-go. Like, while I like Carter and I think he's going to be a good running back, I'm taking the best player available. And even if I don't need a receiver, well, guess what? Rashad Bateman plays to the potential that you think he can really produce at the next level. You can just end up flipping Rashad Bateman for Carter plus afterwards.
Exactly.
So understanding the value and understanding, oh shit, I really need a running back, but the value is just simply not there for me to take one in here. Guess what? Take the best player available and then end up flipping for the guy you need plus after the draft or during the season or whatever you need to be the case there. So I fully agree. Never attack your rookie drafts based solely on need. Now, if it's a tiebreaker and you got 2 guys relatively similarly ranked, one's a running back, one's a receiver, then you can really skew to what you need. But if there's a clear gap in talent, just take the good player and worry about the needs afterwards. You can always trade to bandage needs. You should never draft based on your needs. So I fully agree with that point that you made there.
Yeah, and if you're doing this, you're one of the things that I find with using this strategy is, now me personally, I'm always open to trading. There's never anything that's off limits. But using the strategy, you are more open to trading on draft day, but you're less likely to take a bad deal, because if you eliminate the fact that, oh man, I need to draft for my needs, you're not going to reach on a bad trade. You're not going to reach on a player that should go in the middle of the second round, but you just took him in the first round. No, like if you stick to the best available, you will get the best player available. Now, the only thing with this is that you could get too comfortable with your own rankings. A lot of people will kind of settle into this notion, and we mentioned it before. You want to cross-check your rankings, your analysis, everything like that with other people. If you go about this best available strategy, and for example, I'll go back to him. Dyami Brown. I'm so much higher than the consensus on him. So much higher than the consensus on him.
I like him as well.
If I go purely off of my rankings, if he's there at 112, I would take him at 112. I know not to actually do this though, because you want to gauge where your league mates are going to take guys as well. And that's one of the things that you can kind of figure out their consensus rankings and kind of steal the guys that are next up on their list that aren't too far down your list. The other con with this one is that you can become very predictable on draft day, especially if you're someone like me who has their rankings public for not only the Twitter sphere to see, everyone in my league sees my rankings and they know who I want. They know who I'm going to try to trade up to get. They know who I'm going to trade down to get. Like they know me. And while if you're not a writer, if you don't do videos or whatever, maybe your rankings are personal and you haven't shared them with anyone, they're probably still going to line up at least similar to what the consensus is looking like. And you could become predictable on draft day. And at that point, people stop trading with you because they're like, okay, well, I think they're going to grab this guy, which means I only have 2 more picks to sit through. And you know what? I'll wait it out. So the predictability factor is one of the things with using this strategy that kind of gets a little iffy here or there. But nonetheless, I think drafting for best available, if you're not trading up or trading down, I think it's the safest way to go.
100%. So we mentioned all the different strategies, right? The best available, the trade up, the trade down. What we did not mention, and validly so, is drafting solely based on need. Drafting, oh, I need a running back, I'm going to take the running back. I need a quarterback, I'm going to take the quarterback. I need a receiver, I'm going to take. No. You address your needs by trading. You do not address your needs based off solely the rookie draft. So I love that we addressed that today, especially for newer, younger players or less experienced. I said younger already today. I don't mean it by that. Like, you could be 45 years old and being in your first dynasty league, and I'm calling you young, turning 21 in 2 weeks. Like, no, that's not going to be a thing. But just growing accustomed to snapping on value, being composed, not just rushing or forcing a decision based off these factors is how you get the most optimal value in your rookie drafts. Because at the end of the day here, your rookie drafts, yes, you want to get guys that you like, but the whole point of the rookie draft is to really optimize the overall value of your team. Even if he's your wide receiver 6 and the running back in draft can be your wide receiver or running back 4, guess what? Your wide receiver 6 pops out a little bit. You have more wiggle room to move the top guys or that guy. So I'm all aboard. I really love what we're able to do here. Hopefully, if you guys are watching this video on the draft guide, you're able to really grasp this concept. Again, a lot of your rookie drafts, a lot of your startups are happening at this current point. So at the end of the day here, over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange, we just want to instill a level of confidence and a level of comfortability in your draft situation. So with that being said, anything else you want to head out with before we really stop the recording here?
No, I think we covered everything. And I know it's not mentioned in the article, but I am glad that we, like you mentioned, I'm so glad that we addressed you don't draft for need in your rookie draft, you trade. And I know you just said that, but I'm reiterating it because it's extremely important.
For sure. So with that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed and made it this far in the video. If you did so, comment Zeke Elliott, because you can see the jersey behind me. Comment FF Mikey. Do comment either one of those. You know what? Have fun with the comment section. I just always enjoy seeing the true OGs that make it to this exact word in the video. So that being said, peace out.